Imagine a world where more women had the time to fully explore their genius. Welcome to She Rebel Radio, a community-driven podcast dedicated to supporting women leaders to unlearn conventional rules and create their businesses of significance. This is our International Women's Day Inspire series with our headline partners, NatWest. NatWest has been a pioneer in supporting women in business since 2019. We have 10 new guests sharing their stories with you to inspire, to educate, and to empower. As you navigate this series with us, I'd love for you to consider, what is inspiring you for 2024? How do you personally make it work as a woman in business? And what change would you make to your industry to inspire more inclusion of women? My name's Lulu Mins. I host retreats and create spaces for women leaders to explore their genius. And today, I'm going to create that same space right here for you on this podcast. Welcome to episode 130 of She Rebel Radio, inspiring your journey with Tracy Edwards, MBE. Tracy is the founder of the Maiden Factor Foundation, a global ambassador for the empowerment of girls through education. Now, you may remember she dominated the headlines in 1989 to 1990 when she skippered the first all-female yacht race around the world, winning 2 of the most difficult legs and coming in second place overall. Now, despite being told they couldn't do it with an all-female crew, Tracy and her team showed the world what we as women are really capable of, and she became the first ever woman to win the Yachtsman of the Year trophy as well as an MBE. Her journey stems from being a ballet dancer to being expelled from school to the iconic yacht race, which created a landmark moment not just for competitive sailors but for women all around the world. In 2017, she rescued the Maiden and brought her back to the UK and then restored her for the Maiden Factor Project, whose mission is to empower the 130 million girls worldwide who are not receiving their right to education. As when we educate girls, we change the world. We couldn't agree more, Tracy. I remember your face all over the news when I was about 9 years old. It's so amazing to have you here. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. Really good to speak to you.
Yeah, so good to speak to you. And I think, seeing your face everywhere, I didn't realise the significance of what you'd achieved. But you left education and you found yourself on a boat in Greece, aged just 16. How did your younger years shape you to be a tenacious young woman who refused to be told what she could and couldn't do by others?
Well, I think I've always been fairly belligerent, and as my mother would have said, bloody minded was her favourite expression. So I think that, I had some fairly significant traumas throughout my teenage years. And I think that kind of builds up one's resilience. And I think that really contributed to my total inability to give up on anything. If I wanted to do something, I would make sure that I would do it. A lot of the time I did it just to annoy other people. That wasn't that wasn't the case with Maiden, but I think it contributed a part to it, and also, my mum used to say, you can't give up today because you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And that has always stuck with me. That's the kiss of death. I can't give up today because I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And the other thing is, I don't know what giving up looks like. I don't know how to do that, if that makes sense. For me,
Yeah.
It's always preferable, or even if it doesn't work out, to keep bulldozing forward. That's my default state.
Yeah, I love that, bulldozing forward. And I think I noticed watching those old clips of you that there's a vulnerability there, but a real determination when you're, talking to the cameras and, on the journey that you're on. And I think so often as young women, there is a vulnerability there, but if we've got that determined streak as well, it's a really powerful thing.
Well, I think that's absolutely right. And when I decided to do, put together the first all-female crew to race around the world, it really wasn't from a feminist point of view at all. It was because I wanted to be a navigator on a round the world race boat, and I knew that no man would let me do that. So it was a really selfish reason that I started. But as soon as the first man told me, oh, women can't do that, Then it became a, sort of a feminist issue, and then it became something, okay, we've now absolutely got to do this.
Yeah, I love that. So what did some of those early experiences on boats teach you about women in male dominated environments and them feeling like they can tell us what we can and can't do?
But it's interesting actually, because being a stewardess on a cruising charter yacht, which is what I was, and then, sort of I did various jobs within the charter industry. You don't really naively, I think, at that time. I mean, this was of an era of our lives. I didn't notice the sexism because each yacht has a sort of like a sort of a pseudo nuclear family on board. You've got the skipper, who's always male, and the cook, who's always female, and then the stewardess, who's usually female, and the deckhand, who's male. So you've almost got this mother and father and two children. It's a little bit weird, but you
Yeah.
fall into those roles because, as sort of as a girl, I'd been brought up kind of, I guess, in that role. So that seems perfectly natural. You don't really notice. It's only when you go into the racing world that you think, oh, okay, wait a minute. So this isn't a choice now. We are consigned to below decks because we are not allowed to, sort of do all these other roles. And that's when it really hit me, sort of in the racing world, that I don't have a voice or a platform here at all. Oh, I actually don't exist. So that was a huge step, and I guess a rude awakening, really, to what everyone else knew about the world.
Yeah, I think that I certainly agree with that. My background is in legal practice, a criminal defense litigator.
Oh,
And as you come in, you are in a support role, but when you climb the ranks, then all of a sudden there's the push down of, being in those positions of power, or as you say, as the navigator.
yeah, absolutely. When you're in your place, they're quite happy to have you on board the boat, but when you step out of line, they don't like it.
No, definitely. So who were some of your supporters along the way, and how did that form the idea that you could skip an all-female crew, for the yacht race around the world?
Well, actually, I did have, I had some great male mentors. In fact, every skipper I ever had, and I'm so lucky because there are some horror stories out there. But every skipper I had mentored me in some way and pushed me a little bit further forwards. They saw something in me which at that time I didn't see in myself. The skipper on my second transatlantic crossing said to me, "Can you navigate?" And I just said, "Of course I can't navigate. I was expelled before long division." And he's just said, "Well, that's so irresponsible. You're on a boat in the middle of the ocean. You don't know where you are." I thought, God, that's really that's a very good point. So he taught me to navigate within 2 days, showing me that, maths was not hieroglyphics and, the horror that I thought it was. And so every skipper encouraged me a little bit further forwards, and I wouldn't be here now if it wasn't for them. So, not all men are, sort of within the sailing world were, sort of trying to put us down. It wasn't, I guess, until really that I did my first Whitbread around the world race, which was in 1985-86, and I could only do it as cook. I mean, of 260 people in that race, there were 4 girls. I was one of them, and I was the only girl on an ocean racing maxi, and the first. And the guys didn't want me
And
there.
were all the other girls cooks?
Yeah. Oh, we were all cooks. Yeah. It
Yeah.
was yes. So we were not wanted, but we had somehow managed to force our way onto these boats. And as I say, this thought that as we finished the last leg, I thought, wow, well, that's not as difficult as all the guys told me it was. It's like, whoa, it's not that hard. And then my second thought was, I've got to do this again, but oh God, I can't cook. I just can't do this cooking. So, I love my navigation. I'm a much better navigator than I am a cook, and I knew that at the time. And then this sort of profound realization that at the age of 21, no man would let me navigate on a race boat, possibly in my lifetime. And that's when I
Yeah.
thought, whoa, okay, we've got to change this.
Yeah, amazing. So what were your next steps and challenges to changing that? Did you have to go and get a boat? Did you have to go and get funding, the crew? I'm sure all of it, but what was the starting point?
All of the above. And I mean, it was literally sitting down in a pub, as you know, some really great ideas are formed, with some guy I'd met who's a friend of a friend who said he could be the project manager, and it was literally back of a beer mat. How much do you think we need? You know, we need a boat, we need a crew, we need money, and we realised very quickly that there was going to be a lot of pushback, which we hadn't naively expected, but also that we were going to have to take on a lot of roles that we didn't really know anything about. But it was, I think, at that point that I realised I'd learned so much on the 85-86 race that I hadn't even realised I'd learned. You know, just cooking for 17 men sailing around the world. Teaches you budgeting, you know, so learning how to put a budget together, how to manage it. I'd done a few interviews because I was one of the only girls on this race. So all of these things, I thought, okay, actually, we know more than we think we do. We also know what we don't know. So it's a matter of literally putting one foot in front of the other. You know, yes, you've got the big picture of, you know, winning around the world race. That's always in your mind, but then you have to bring it right back to the minutiae. And, you know, it's process, and, you know, sort of taking those small steps, understanding where you're going, and, you know, you can do anything.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. And it's important, isn't it? As you know, we need to know things from the bottom up. You can't just start with the big picture and not know all the tiny little things that build up to that.
Well, that's right. I mean, you know, if you stand at the foothills of Everest, look up the top and go, "That's where I'm going," you probably think, "Oh my goodness," you know. But you look at base camp, you think, "Oh, I can do that. I can get there." And then you get to base camp and you look at Camp One or whatever it's called, and then you think, "Yeah, I can do that." So it really is, and it's the same when you're sailing, you know, sort of in these horrendous conditions. You know, you don't walk into those horrendous conditions on day one. You've built up to them. You've built that knowledge, that resilience, and that's what we were doing really the whole time. So by the time we crossed the start line, we were a battle hardened, you know, sort of so ready, crew and team ready to take on this challenge. And in a way, that was an advantage because some of the other boats, well, most of the other boats, haven't had nearly the battle that we'd had to get to the start line. So they were almost starting, you know, sort of from scratch, whereas we were, you know, as I say, completely ready to go and take on this challenge.
Yeah, perfect. And I think you had 9 different nationalities in a crew of 12 women. And I think your best friend from school was on the boat with you. Now, you were routinely asked by the press how you all got on.
Oh,
Why was that frustrating for you?
oh just, well, things used to get thrown at us, you know. You're not strong enough. Okay, well, we know that women are not as strong as men, but that's why we've redesigned our boat to use the PowerPoints that women have, which are different from men. It also takes brains to race around the world, not brawn. So, you know, oh well, you're not smart enough. You're not the, you know. So every time we achieved something, something else would be thrown in our path, and when every other thing had been exhausted, the last refuge of men who are scared that women are walking into their domain is, oh, women don't get on. And I remember
Mm.
thinking, I mean, I was so young when I started this project. How old was I? 22. I remember thinking even then, where does this come from? This women don't get on. I get on with all the female sailors I've met, and you know, not that there are that many of them. And I, you know, I guess I am a woman's woman. So I
Yeah.
never really understood that. And then they throw that in our face after, and all the other crews would get, you know, really technical questions about, well, how did you race the boat and why did you make this decision? And we'd get, did you all get on?
Yeah, it's boring. It's that, and I think the distinction as well is, as you said there, men getting asked the technical questions and you're getting asked the relationship based questions of your relationship with each other rather than anything of any
It
importance.
was, and you know, I had to learn. These are some good lessons, actually. I became a little bit of a politician, although I guess it's a dirty word at the moment. But
Yeah.
someone taught me how to manage questions. You don't answer the question; you say what you want to say. So I thought, oh, that's interesting. So I remember at one of the press conferences, one of the journalists, and this is no word of a lie, his question to me was, I think this is the leg we won. This was the first leg we'd won. So his question to me was, do you all have your periods at the same time? And I just thought, oh my God. I mean, who asks that anyway? And why? We've just won this leg. I mean, don't you want to know why we went so far south and what our tactics were going around Kerguelen and everything else? And I lost it. So then I was taken aside. And the next time I had this question, I think it became a bit of a thing amongst some of the male journalists to throw us, sort of. And my next answer was, well, actually, yes, we do. And it was while we were all having our periods at the same time that we managed to make the decision to go really far south and take this tack. And so I learned, okay, that's how I manage these questions and say what I want to say.
Yeah, and that's so interesting that you were asked the same question more than once.
Well, I think it became a challenge to them. I mean, it's such a boys' club sometimes.
Yeah, 100%. So tell us more about the two legs that you came first on. How did that feel for you as a team? And I think you've said that, the more that successful the maiden became, the more that you were met with aggression.
There was a lot of pushback. I think that everyone assumed, I mean, the journalists had bets on how far we'd get on the first leg. None of them thought we would reach Uruguay. Even though what's not shown in the documentary, so it's sort of become fact, we did actually win our first ever race, which was a transatlantic, which they knew. But
right.
no, we wouldn't be able to make it to Uruguay. So when we made it to Uruguay, everyone was a bit, oh, whoops. And so they weren't quite so complacent, I think, about, well, just let the girls get on with it, they'll probably all die. So when we set off for the second leg, I mean, we were God, you've never seen a more determined bunch of people in your life. I'd spent every waking moment looking at the weather, listening to the old salts on the other boats, the men that I respect, the skippers that I respected, and who did actually, really took the time to speak to me, even though they probably didn't tell their mates that. And we had a very clear plan going into the Southern Ocean that we were going to take some very big risks because we figured you only do this once. Okay, I was doing it twice, but this is our chance to get out there and show what women can do. So we took a vote. It's the only time I've ever asked everyone's opinion on something. Otherwise, I made decisions myself. But I couldn't have anyone, as we were going south, say, oh, I think we were going to be going this far south, and I don't like the look of those icebergs. So we all agreed we are going to take these very big risks, and we did. And it totally paid off. I mean, it was pretty scary because we were quite a way away from the rest of the fleet at some points. So no help if something had happened. But coming into Australia in first place was, I mean, it was almost indescribable, the level of happiness and excitement and just that we'd done it, and we'd beaten the next boat by 38 hours, which is a huge gap within a class of the Whitbread. And just watching, because we then go down and meet all the other boats in, just watching their jaws drop as they got in, and we were standing there. It was it was fantastic. Loved every minute of it.
Perfect. And what you said there about you took big risks and you put a vote out to the crew. What would you say to that? There's a lot of, I guess, comments that women are less likely to take big risks. Do you agree with that? I think I can anticipate your answer. And what would you say to women about taking big risks and how they can step into that more?
I think this is such an interesting question. I think women are less likely to take needless risks. I don't think women are less likely to take big risks. I think we are, I've always thought the country should be run by housewives, because they know how to budget, they know what the risks are, they can juggle 20 million things at the same time. I don't think it's anyone more qualified, rather than these men who know nothing. So
I quite often say women over 50 should be running the country.
I could not agree. I couldn't agree more with you. But no, It is an interesting question, because I remember during the banking crisis that the only British bank that didn't need bailing out was the bank that had more women members on the board than any other bank. I remember thinking that's so interesting. So, yes, they're at board levels, so they're obviously capable of taking risks, but they haven't taken the risks that have seen all the other banks land in this sort of total hot water. So I would say there's a difference between taking risks and being gung ho.
Yeah,
And I think as well, I mean, it's a little bit of a generalization, but I think we're probably always thinking about, well, what's the effect on my family going to be, and how's that going to work? Sort of maybe looking at the bigger picture. But yeah, men and women are different, but vive la difference. You see, that's the thing. It's always, for me, been equal but different, equal but
yeah,
different. My most successful sailing team ever was the first ever mixed sailing team, a professional sailing team, 6 girls and 6 guys. And it was the most successful record breaking team for about a 10-year period. Because if you get the best men and the best women, not rocket science, you get the best team. So, well, I think we
yeah.
complement each other.
Yeah, I totally agree, and we're definitely all about that on She Rebel Radio, equality, but we are different, and
Yeah.
how we can own those differences. And as women, we're taking bigger risks all the time. In terms of, if something had gone wrong on the race for you, do you feel that you would have been, kind of blamed or demonized far more than had that happen on a ship that was navigated by a man?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, totally. It would have been, oh, stupid. Oh God, that is a stupid mistake. I mean, in 2006, I was forced into bankruptcy, because I did take a very big risk, putting on an event in the Middle East. We weren't paid, and I had risked everything. But the same year that I went into bankruptcy, a male sailor also went into bankruptcy, and the headlines about me were pretty much stupid cow. She obviously didn't know what she was doing. She didn't understand the situation, and the headlines about him were, oh, what a trooper to have taken a risk like that. Oh, I mean, how brave. I was just like, so it's a very stark reminder.
Yeah. Yeah, of those, the additional criticism that we face as women for the same thing.
Exactly
It,
the
it
same.
comes. Yeah, it's so you also you put yourself in financial risk for the voyage of the Maiden. You remortgaged your home. And how difficult is it to get sponsoring in competitive sailing anyway? And how did that extra element of having an all-female crew cause any further barriers?
Yeah, I mean, anyone who's ever tried to raise money for any sport will know it's hard. It really is. There was a golden era when the money was just pouring into sports, but it's times are hard, and you have to fight for, so for every sponsorship deal, every penny. At the time, we were seen as a huge risk. Yes, they got that if we did it, it would be great PR, but almost every company we spoke to aired on the sort of on the side of caution, which was, yeah, if they all die, it's not going to be really great publicity for us.
Yeah,
So yeah, it is harder today, in this day and age. It is so hard for women to raise money for women's sports. I think the media has become better at showing. I mean, look at women's football and rugby and cricket. How fantastic! The news, the sports channels, news channels, and terrestrial channels show so much more women's sport. But it is still hard, very hard to raise the funds.
yeah. What did you learn about yourself in terms of leadership and negotiating, deals and money and things like that? Anything that you can share tips wise with the listeners?
I think that, well, I mean, not giving up. And that, is obviously easier said than done. But don't give up, don't give up, don't give up, don't give up was my absolute mantra. Um, I learned about myself that I was a little bit more aware of my responsibility than I I'd realized quite early on it was a selfish decision that I wanted to navigate, and okay, let's have an all-female crew so we can prove we can do it. And again, even at that time, that wasn't really, for everyone else. But as we went through the project, I became a person that I didn't know I was, as I realized I was in the middle of this huge battle that I didn't know I was going to have. And I remember thinking and I came close to giving up a couple of times where I just thought, oh, we're on our knees. I don't know how we're going to I can't buy dog food, let alone pay people, so we were sort of at that stage. And then I thought about the women who'd come before us and the women who would come after us. And I thought, no, I can't, because, I stand on the shoulders of the women who've done so much to prepare the way. And I can't give up, because the next all-female crew that comes along won't just have all of this to deal with, they'll have our failure as well, sort of like an albatross around their neck. And we can't do that. So this huge sense of responsibility became overwhelming, and was probably a little bit more stressful than it should have been. But that I guess, my responsibility to others became a huge driving force.
Yeah, and I feel like, as I've said in the intro for your episode, that you didn't just impact competitive sailing for women, it was women all around the world. I remember your face. I was saying to a couple of my girlfriends who I grew up with the other day that you and I were speaking. They were like, oh my god, that's really cool, because you were just showing us that women were doing what guys were doing, whether we wanted to do that or something else. It's such a powerful legacy to leave.
Thank you. Well, I think, I don't want my daughter to have the same battles that I had, and my mum didn't want me to have the same battles that she had. She was a women's libber, and each generation of women, I hope, paves the way for the women that come after us. And for me, everything we do now with girls' education, with Maiden, is about that, opportunity for women and girls. And I mean, quite frankly, if women around the world, I think it would be in a lot better shape than it is right now. Um, but so that aside, if we do not have equality of the sexes, if we do not have equality in education, how can we possibly expect to be able to fix the world's problems? And if so many studies have been done now, and UNICEF study in particular, if every girl had an education, we could probably fix every problem that we have in the world. So, this is a huge part of humanity moving forward, equality.
Yeah, 100%. So tell us more about your work with the Maiden Factor. And the Maiden changed your life, and you're now, she is with the Maiden Factor Foundation, changing the lives of girls around the world with the importance of education. Why has that been so important for you, and what's the work that you're doing there?
I think that because, I mean, I was expelled when I was 15 and treated education with such contempt, because I live in a nice Western country where I'm offered a free education on a silver plate, whether it's great or not great in this country at the moment, I'm still offered it. And I was so arrogant, and learning as we were rescuing Maiden and bringing her back to the UK in 2017, and thinking, well, what are we going to do with her after restoring her to her former glory? And I was thinking, I wonder if we could use her in some way to inspire the girls. And then my daughter said, well, why don't we do like a lap of honor around the world? And I thought, I love that idea. And then, girls educate. I was patron of a couple of girls' educational charities, and I just learning. Oh, it's been a huge learning curve. Learning that 130 million girls, and that was in 2017. It's now worse, not better, thanks to the
Right.
pandemic and of the awful situation in Afghanistan. But for me, learning that 130 million girls don't have the opportunity that I threw away was an absolutely huge wake up call for me. And I just felt so ashamed and so angry. And so we started working with a number of girls' educational charities all over the world. And we figured, look, we don't know how to get girls into education, but we can raise funds and awareness. So we formed some really exciting partnerships. And as we sail around the world, and we started the world tour in 2018. Maiden's now racing around the world, but that's her final time around.
Yeah.
The whole point was to raise funds and awareness for girls' education, and in particular to fund STEM programs in countries all over the world.
Amazing. Yeah, girls and technology and science and all of those important subjects. Absolutely. So what is inspiring you and the Maiden Factor for 2024? And where can we find you at the Maiden Factor?
So at the moment, Maiden is racing around the world. Her final time around, I think she's ready for well, not total retirement, but the ocean racing, the sort of big ocean stuff probably. So she's racing around the world with the first black female crew members to ever sail around the world, which is
Amazing.
in 2024 so shocking. But you
Yeah.
know, we're so happy we're doing it. We also have a woman from Afghanistan as our camera woman on board. She escaped from the Taliban 2 years ago. So our inspiration really for this race has been to, you know, sailing is described as male, pale, and stale. So with Maiden 35 years ago, you know, we dealt with the male and the stale bit, and now we're dealing with the pale bit. So that's our mission. We
Yeah, and
also
as you say, 2024 is a long time coming.
absolutely, well, we know that if a girl can see it, she can be it. And so we want girls all over the world to look at Maiden, see someone that looks like them and think, I can do that. I can do that. That's, you know, hugely important for me. So we're not entirely sure what happens at the end of the race. We might do a tour of the UK and Ireland, which we haven't actually done yet. We've done the entire world 3 times, but we haven't done UK and Ireland. So maybe that's next. And you can find us at themaidenfactor.org.
Perfect. And the Maiden, it being her last round the world race, is that because of her age? Is she?
Yes, so she's reached a point now where, so there's a kind of tipping point with boats where they start to become so expensive to maintain. I would rather be raising money for girls' education than for Maiden to sail around the world again. She's done a great job over the past 6 years, 5 years, and what we've done is we've used her to raise awareness of our work, and so I mean she will carry on, but just not the big ocean stuff, which is, you know, she's getting on a bit like me. Haha.
Yeah, I was going to say, and what an amazing final mission in terms of that, you know, should have been done a long time ago in 2024 and addressing that imbalance in terms of the pale part 100%. And just to wrap up as well, with your voyage around the world in the Maiden, you came second overall, and that was better than any British team had done for 11 years. Did the press response change and you were celebrated, or were there still, well, you know, was there still criticism?
It mostly changed. Yeah, it did. It took some work. One of my favorite quotes, Bob Fisher, I mean, he sadly is no longer with us, but he was just this doyen of yachting journalism. And, you know, if he didn't write good things about you, or, you know, you were really in for it. And he set the tone, and he wrote for, I think it was the Guardian. So I mean, broadsheet, you know, not some, you know, little yachting mag. And his headline of one of his articles one day was, Maiden is just a tin full of tarts. And I remember when we read it, I mean, we probably weren't as angry as we should have been, because, as I say, it was a different time, but we did use it to spur ourselves on. And I remember when we sailed into New Zealand, having won our second leg, Bob Fisher was actually on one of the boats out at 2 o'clock in the morning to meet us in, and he was actually singing, which is what is going on. And the next article he wrote was, Maiden is not just a tin full of tarts, they're a tin full of smart, fast tarts. And I remember we loved it, but I remember someone saying to me, you do know the word tarts is still in that sentence. I said, baby steps, baby steps. And, you know, Bob was one of the very few yachting journalists of that era that came to meet Maiden in 2017 when we rescued her and brought her back to the UK. And he said to me, you know, can I interview about what Maiden's going to do? And I told him about, girls' education. He said, "Tell me about girls' education." I said, "Bob, you have come a long way." He said, "Tracy, I had a good teacher." And so, I mean, he was a real success story of ours, supported everything we did after that. But most yachting journalists did, they bit the bullet, and, the articles were fantastic at the end of the race.
Yeah, beautiful. And it is about us, as you say, educating others and
Yeah,
recognizing those different times. And we are, I believe, as humans, we are here to evolve and improve. So that's a beautiful story to finish on.
thank you.
Thank you so much for being with us on She Rebel Radio, Tracy. It's been really, really amazing to speak to you.
Absolute pleasure.
You've been listening to She Rebel Radio. We thank you for listening and thank our headline partners NatWest for sponsoring this series. If this episode has inspired you, please pass it on and share with at least one other incredible woman, and don't forget to hit subscribe and leave us a review. You can find out more about me and my work at lulumins.com or on most social media platforms.